We've talked about playoff upsets on this channel. In fact, it was the inaugural video of our NFL Rankings videos playlist, a video we have linked in the description below. But those were just single games. How about a run through the entire playoffs? Using this channel's C-score metric, whose explanation you can also see in the description below, we have determined which NFL teams had the best run through a playoffs based on the strength of opponents they defeated, or in simpler terms, the 10 most prolific giant killers during the Super Bowl era. Before we ramp up, wanted to thank you for clicking on this video. I continue to appreciate all the support this channel has been receiving as we inch toward that 1,000 mark in subscribers. If you haven't yet done so, I would ask that you consider doing so. We're not just a football channel, we've got some videos in the entertainment world as well, particularly movies and TV shows. Thank you for joining us today, and on with the countdown. It wasn't required that these teams be Super Bowl champions, but it just so happened that they all are. And we're going to start off at number 10 with the 2000 Baltimore Ravens. The relevant stat here is C-score conquered. That is to say, the combined C-score of the teams that they beat in the playoffs that season. And that can be seen right here on this roll call shield. The Ravens put together a score of 73.785, a very good score that got it into number 10. At 12-4, the Ravens were a great team, but they stagnated in the middle of the season, and they finished behind the 13-3 Titans in the AFC Central. As the top wild card in a 3-division structure, which they had in 2000, they did get to play at home in the first round, but they hit the road after that. It didn't seem to stop them though, as they took down the top-seeded Titans before winning in the black hole to get to the Super Bowl. And their defensive performance in Super Bowl 35 is the stuff of legends, becoming just the third team to pitch a defensive shutout in that game, only allowing a kickoff return for a touchdown. From the team currently in Baltimore to the team formerly from Baltimore are the Indianapolis Colts of 2006. They were 12-4 and were crowned AFC South champions, but they were the 3 seed and did not get a bye in the playoffs. Their combined C-score conquering was 78.514, and here are the teams that they beat to achieve that number. Even though the Colts were the 3 seed, they became the first non-1 or 2 seed to host a conference championship game since the expansion to 6 playoff teams from each conference, where they engineered a stirring come-from-behind victory against the Patriots. Now, this was nowhere near the strongest Colts team from the late 90s into the early 2000s, but it is the team that brought home the Lombardi. Outside of the weak Chiefs in the wild card, they certainly did engage in some giant killing, with every team they beat notching at least a 20 C-score, including the Bears in Super Bowl 41, who many saw as a paper tiger because most so-called experts distill an entire team down to just one player, while forgetting the talent trove that existed throughout the rest of the roster. At number 8 are the 1968 New York Jets, at 11-3 winners of the AFL Eastern Division, a very weak division. Their C-score conquered was 82.973, almost 83, and we gotta say this is a mighty impressive accomplishment, seeing as though they only defeated 2 teams to achieve that number. Now, as division champions, they went straight to the AFL title game, where they faced off with a powerful but disadvantaged Oakland Raiders team, who had to win a tiebreaker for their very good division before flying cross-country to take on the rest of the Jets. But credit to the Jets, they not only beat the Raiders in that game, they went on to Super Bowl III against the absolute powerhouse Baltimore Colts, legitimately one of the top 10 teams of the Super Bowl era, and they completely controlled the game with their ground and pound offense and their opportunistic defense, pulling off one of the largest upsets in NFL history and capturing, to date, their only Super Bowl championship. As we enter the 80-plus territory of C-score conquering, we stay in the AFL era with the final AFL champions at number 7, the 1969 Kansas City Chiefs. And these are the teams they defeated to achieve that score. Now at 11-3, the Chiefs did not win their division, but second place teams were given entry into the playoffs. And while they aren't explicitly considered a wildcard team, in practice they most certainly are, as they went on the road for both of those games. They proceeded to defeat the defending champion Jets before taking out two juggernauts in the Raiders, who beat the Chiefs out for the division, and the underrated Minnesota Vikings. Underrated only because they're not always thought of as an all-time great team, or even an all-time great non-champion, which they very much should be. But the Chiefs ran the same basic game plan as the Jets the season before, running the ball effectively, forcing turnovers, and in this case getting a big play in the passing game out of the ever-underrated Otis Taylor. Now we backtrack a couple of years, remaining in the pre-merger era, to the end of the Vince Lombardi era of the Green Bay Packers, the 1967 squad winning their second straight Super Bowl and their fifth NFL title overall in the decade. With the three teams they defeated in the playoffs this year, their C-score conquered was 84.386. This was indeed the end of the line for this group, as they only achieved a 9-4-1 record, the lowest record of any of their championship teams. But whatever supposed fumes that were keeping that engine running were still strong enough. Ironically, the biggest and most famous win from this group was also, on paper, the easiest, when they scored very late in the NFL championship game to beat the Cowboys in the Ice Bowl. A Cowboy team that wasn't quite at the standard it would be reaching over the next decade or so. The Packers then walloped the Raiders in Super Bowl II to forever cement their legacy and that of their head coach, now permanently memorialized on the trophy that bears his name. We get a little more modern here as we enter the top 5 with the 2011 New York Giants. Now this team only finished 9-7 and they were outscored during the regular season, but they were still able to win the NFC East, taking the number 4 seed in the playoffs, allowing them a home game in the wild card round. In our recent countdown of all 58 Super Bowl champions, a video you can watch by clicking the card in the upper right corner of your screen, these Giants came in dead last at 58th. But it wasn't on account of their actual playoff run, because after beating the only OK Falcons in the wild card round, they went through 3 different teams who checked in with C-scores over 20. That Packers team entered the playoffs at 15-1 and became the first ever 15-plus win team to fail to win a playoff game. With their second Super Bowl victory in 4 seasons, both of them over the New England Patriots, the Giants of this era fully established themselves as the little engine that could. Once they were able to get that engine on the tracks anyway. A 13-1 team in their own right, the 1976 Oakland Raiders nonetheless had to mow through some powerful competition during the playoffs in earning their place as the 4th biggest giant killer of the Super Bowl era. And at 13-1, naturally they had the AFC's best record as the West champions. They got to play all their games at home, but that doesn't take away from that competition. The Patriots were excellent this season and in fact dealt the Raiders their one loss, but by the numbers they were Oakland's easiest opponent. The Steelers would have been considered an all-time great team this season if not for their 1-4 start to the season. Then the Vikings were what they always were during the past 10 seasons, an excellent, borderline dominant football team that just couldn't get the job done in the playoffs, completing their 4th consecutive Super Bowl appearance with yet another scoreless first half. Oakland ran through the Purple People Eaters like they weren't even there, to the tune of 266 rushing yards, to land the franchise its first ever Super Bowl title. Getting a number 6 seed in the playoffs means starting your run against a strong team before theoretically advancing on some much stronger teams as the playoffs rolled on. Such was the case for our number 3 giant killer, the 2005 Pittsburgh Steelers. We have crossed the 90-point threshold in C-score conquered with this team. At 11-5, they were better than their record indicated, but they did have to settle for that number 6 seed. The Bengals' C-score wasn't the highest in the wild card round, but this was a quality team that the Steelers needed to escape. From here, it was a gauntlet, with every team in the 26 to 27 range. Beating any one of these teams would be impressive on its own, but taking down the first two on the road before taking out the NFC's #1 seed, the Seattle Seahawks, is pretty historic, despite some of the controversy that surrounds this particular game. Historic enough, in fact, that these Steelers went on a playoff run that has only ever been surpassed by two teams in terms of quality opponents defeated. It just so happens that one of those teams to surpass them did so this past season, as the current reigning champions of the NFL, the Kansas City Chiefs, just completed the second largest giant-killing playoff run of the Super Bowl era. And they didn't do it by much, edging past the Steelers with a 91.642 C-score Concord score. They were 11-6, not the best season the Chiefs have put up in this era, but they were the West champions and got the #3 seed. That allowed them to start off at home in the playoffs before hitting the road. And they started out by clearing the entire AFC East playoff contingent, smacking the Dolphins before skating past the Bills. It's the two teams they beat for the AFC Championship and the Super Bowl itself that catapulted the Chiefs in these rankings. The Ravens put up a C-score that on its own would have placed them in the top 15 Super Bowl champions of all time. Had they actually won this game, then won the Super Bowl, that score would have risen and threatened the top 10. And then came that thrilling victory over the 49ers in the Super Bowl, an overtime battle that continued their ownership of the Niners, having defeated them in the Super Bowl just 4 years earlier. Yet, standing above the crowd are the miracle 2007 New York Giants. This team finished 10-6, did not win the NFC East, and had to enter the playoffs as a wild card, going on the road as the 5th seed. Each team on their path got progressively harder, and except for the barely above average Buccaneers in the wild card round, every team they faced not only had higher C-scores than them, but they were at least doubled by those C-scores. Yet, the Giants went into Dallas and beat the Cowboys, then went into Green Bay and beat the Packers. Super Bowl 42 was next, and, well, it was just the undefeated New England Patriots on the other side of the field, awaiting their coronation as the first ever 19-0 team in NFL history. With a C-score of almost 50, a coronation seemed likely. But it wasn't meant to be. In what went down as the single greatest upset in playoff history, and probably in all of NFL history, the Giants won to raise their C-score Concord into the triple digits. Tom Coughlin's new Big Blue Wrecking Crew of 2007 stand as the NFL's biggest giant killers of the Super Bowl era. Looking now at the entire top 10, we can see that gap between the 07 Giants and everyone else. The Chiefs are closer to the Jets in 8th place than they are to the Giants in 1st. The Giants and the Chiefs, in occupying the top 2 spots on this countdown, are also the only franchises to show up on this list twice. I can't not point out the irony that the NFL's biggest giant killers are a team known as the Giants. The 1968 Jets, 67 Packers, and 76 Raiders are the only teams here who never had to play a road game, while the 69 Chiefs, 05 Steelers, and the 07 Giants were the only teams who never played a home game in their respective runs. Thank you so much for watching this video and making it all the way to the end. Hopefully you enjoyed it enough to give it a like and to share with some friends. And if you haven't yet done so, please consider subscribing to the channel. We have so many more countdowns to include in our rankings playlist just waiting in the pipeline. But as always, if you have any ideas for future videos, I would love to hear them in the comments section below. And any thoughts you had on this particular list would also be welcome in the comments. Until next time, thank you again so much for watching, and I hope you have an awesome day.